Dead by Daylight is a rewarding game, dear viewer. Every time we outplay a survivor by predicting their actions or calling their bluff, we feel rewarded. Indeed, these moments of tension and mind games always keep us coming back for more. However, I'd argue that the game itself sometimes does a poor job of rewarding its killers in a number of ways. Some design choices can range anywhere from slightly odd to completely baffling, and everything in between. Today, I want to present a rework concept that seeks to make changes to the Bloodpoint scoring, emblems, and the Endcard screens, in hopes of creating a more satisfying system that does more to reward killers for their actions in-game. But first, you guessed it dear viewer, a quick preface before we start. This rework is focused solely on the feedback a player receives about their performance in a trial. It doesn't cover anything such as matchmaking or the MMR system. These topics are important discussions, but are separate from what we're talking about here today. The focus of this rework is on the things a player sees, rather than anything that goes on behind the scenes. Also, this video is one half of an overall concept. When writing the script, I had the discussion bounce between killers and survivors for each segment. However, it felt messy, and so I've decided to create two separate videos for each half. This video is for the killers. If you want to see the survivors video, click the link in the description. Now, enough talk, on with the video. Let's start by talking about Bloodpoints, dear viewer. They're the bread and butter of Dead by Daylight. All progression in the game is tied to the endless spending of Bloodpoints that we earn by completing various actions in trials. And, for the most part, this system is great. Players that engage with the game and contribute to the match receive Bloodpoints for their efforts. The devil, however, is in the details. At the moment, killers receive Bloodpoints for various actions, but the game doesn't care how you complete those actions. For example, when you hit a survivor with a basic attack, you'll earn 300 brutality points. However, the game doesn't distinguish if you earned this hit by outplaying a survivor in a chase, or if you simply camped an already hooked survivor in order to get an easy hit. This concept includes a number of adjustments to scoring events in order to reward killers who engage in fun gameplay whilst avoiding unpopular tactics such as camping and tunneling. First, killers would earn a full 250 brutality blood points for breaking pallets and breakable walls, or damaging generators. These actions typically occur when a killer is patrolling the map and chasing survivors, rather than camping. Increasing the blood point gain would reward killers who engage with healthy gameplay and reduce incentives for camping. Further, taking a health state while further than 24 meters from a hooked survivor would grant 600 brutality points, rather than the usual 300. Again, the focus is on rewarding players who avoid camping. Next, the earning of devious blood points is mostly tied to an individual killer's power. However, there is one universal scoring event that I think is slightly unhealthy. At the end of a trial, if every survivor is killed or sacrificed, the killer will earn 2,500 devious blood points for the No One Escaped event. Most of the time, a killer is likely to be using a blood point boosting offering, which means that this is usually 5,000 blood points up for grabs, the equivalent of an ultra rare node on a blood web. This makes slugging for the 4K far more rewarding than it should be, and as such, this rework concept alters this event. Now, the event would only grant 500 devious blood points, a much less precious incentive that still acknowledges the killer's ability to catch and kill the final survivor. Alongside this would be a base increase to devious points earned by power usage. However, with so many powers, I don't have time to talk about all of them individually. That'll be saved for the killer rework concepts. Finally is an addition that I think would be very satisfying to use. Under this concept, players would gain devious blood points when using their perks. For example, revealing a survivor's aura with barbecue and chili would grant devious points. Damaging a generator while Pop Goes the Weasel is active would also grant devious points. And finally, hitting a survivor with a lunge while Coup de Grace is active would grant devious points. In total, the idea here is that using your power and perks would grant more devious blood points, regardless of the killer you're using. and achieving a 4k would grant you far less devious points. Next is hunting points. These are typically earned for finding and chasing survivors. For the most part, this category is fine. However, in order to reward healthy behaviour, the hunting blood points earned for finding a survivor would be increased by 50% if you start that chase within 30 seconds of hooking a survivor. The focus is on rewarding players who don't linger near hooks and instead focus on moving between chases quickly. Finally is the sacrifice points category. At the moment, a player will earn a flat 700 sacrifice points for putting survivors onto the hook. The thing is, this means that there's no incentive to spread hooks. If a killer tunnels, they'll still earn the same amount of blood points as someone who spreads their hooks. As such, under this concept, killers would be able to earn additional sacrifice points with a new scoring event. If a killer hooks all survivors at least once before anyone is sacrificed, they would gain 2,500 sacrifice blood points for the Sacrificial Lambs event. In this way, spreading hooks would earn a killer more blood points and be more rewarding than simply tunneling players. Overall, these changes to the scoring events would encourage killers to engage with healthy gameplay, and reward players who focus on patrolling generators and chasing all survivors, rather than resorting to camping and tunneling. In this next section, we're going to discuss emblems. Years ago, emblems would directly affect your matchmaking, dear viewer. Indeed, the emblems you earned in a match would affect your grade, and this in turn would affect who you played against in matches. Nowadays, however, they simply act as an indirect means of earning blood points, either through rank reset or archive challenges. Either way, there is still an incentive for players to do well and earn blood points by achieving good emblems at the end of a match. However, the emblem system itself can encourage unhealthy behaviour and, much like blood point scoring, be far too harsh to killers. First is the Chaser emblem. The problem with this emblem, dear viewer, is that it doesn't account for variables that can lead to downing survivors. There are many instances in which a killer can do well and still earn a mediocre emblem, based on how the game rates your chases. So, under this concept, this emblem is now the Slasher emblem. For the most part it's the same, still granting a killer points based on their performance in chase. However, there are some notable additions. First, earning a hit without a chase will grant players points towards the emblem, and a bonus set of points for a stealth hit. Further, downing a healthy survivor with a single hit will grant double the usual slasher points earned, meaning that using a chainsaw or the exposed status effect is rewarded appropriately. In total, this slight rework seeks to keep the fundamental concept of this emblem the same. It measures how well a killer can secure hits. The difference now is that killers can earn more slasher points even if they make use of their lethal or stealth abilities. Next is the Devout emblem. The problem here is simple. The scoring system is far too strict. In order to earn a decent emblem, dear viewer, the killer must focus on sacrificing survivors, not earning hook states. As such, players are actively encouraged to tunnel survivors, as this will earn them a much better emblem. For example, if I earn an 8 piece, that is, hooking all survivors twice before anyone dies, the game will only grant a bronze emblem. However, if I turbo tunnel a survivor and kill them on my third hooking action, and then do the same to a second survivor, the game will grant me a better emblem, despite the fact that I earned less hooks with more favourable conditions. As such, this concept makes the focus of this emblem on earning hook states, with an emphasis on spreading hook states across all players. First, the emblems earned are directly tied to the amount of hooks earned, according to this table. 2 hooks for a bronze emblem, 4 for a silver, 6 for a gold, and 8 for an iridescent. Further, the gold and iridescent emblems have an extra clause. They require a player to hook all survivors at least once in order to make the emblems achievable. Simply, this rework puts a focus on a killer earning hook states, rather than sacrifices. As such, a killer could spread the hooks and still achieve a good result with this emblem. The next emblem is Gatekeeper. This one simply puts a focus on holding generators for as long as possible by awarding points based on the number of uncompleted generators remaining at given intervals. For the most part, this emblem is fine, but it doesn't account for varying factors such as snowballing. Consider this example, dear viewer. I'm playing as the clown, and in my match, I hold the generators for 8 minutes, with generators being completed at a steady pace throughout the match. Then, in my next match, I play as the Oni. During this match, I have a rough start and lose 3 generators within the first 3 minutes. However, once my power is ready, the match begins to snowball, and survivors struggle to recover from this major setback. In the end, it takes 5 minutes for the remaining 2 generators to be completed. In total, I hold the generators for 8 minutes. Now, because I lost a few generators early on, my emblem points are worse off, even though I held the match for the same duration as my previous one. This type of situation adversely affects certain killers more than others, typically those with a setup period. As such, the reworked emblem simply grants a fixed number of points at each time interval, with a greater hold time granting players more points. Further, killers would earn points for specific events such as damaging generators, having them regress for at least 30 seconds, or chasing survivors away from generators. In this way, a killer could still earn a decent emblem whilst giving the survivors an opportunity to progress their objective. Finally is the malicious emblem. At the moment, this emblem is vague in its focus. It states that it rewards players for pressuring survivors. This is earned by hurting, interrupting and downing survivors, as well as hooking them. Given that this is a vague set of requirements, and that some of these events would be measured by other emblems, this concept changes the emblem to focus on a killer using their power effectively. Much like devious Bloodpoints, each power would have values unique to each of its events. However, the overall concept is the same. Using your power effectively grants points. These points then contribute to a better emblem in the post-game summary. The focus here would simply be on killers actively making use of their powers. For example, a player who lands their special attack would earn more points than a player who uses it as a zoning tool. In this way, killers would be encouraged and rewarded for engaging with more interesting gameplay. The focus of this emblem rework is to create a set of clear and fair requirements for earning emblems. Killers would be rewarded for engaging with healthy gameplay and their commitment to the game over the course of any given month. Now it's time to talk about Endcards, dear viewer, the phrases shown to a player immediately after they finish a match. For killers, you'll be told that you are a brutal, ruthless or merciless killer, or that the entity hungers. At the moment, the system is pretty simple, with the phrases being entirely based on the number of sacrifices earned in a trial. However, this is another example of the kills equals skill mentality, which I consider to be very unhealthy. So, under this concept, the phrases would instead be tied to the number of hooks achieved in a trial. Achieving 4 hooks would make you a brutal killer, 6 would make you ruthless, and finally 8 would make you a merciless killer. In addition to these requirements, both the ruthless and merciless phrases would require a player to hook all survivors at least once. Once again, the focus is on encouraging and rewarding healthy gameplay that gets all players involved. As an extension of this segment, I want to talk about a set of achievements that I consider to be problematic, dear viewer, and those are the Adepts. These achievements require a player to earn a merciless killer victory whilst only using a killer's 3 teachable perks. At the moment, there are so many hurdles to overcome in order to get these achievements that a player will often need to resort to underhanded tactics just to have a chance. I can personally attest that this was the case on a large portion of my own Adepts, dear viewer, in which I either had my MMR drop to the point of basically smurfing, or camping, slugging and tunneling to an eventual victory. And it's not hard to see why. When looking at the killer roster, 51% don't have a single slowdown perk, and of the remaining 49% who do, I'd argue that 42% have slowdown perks so bad they're only in this category on a technicality. Overall, this means that about 74% of killers are attempting to achieve 4 kills with little to no slowdown in their matches. Is it any wonder that they may need to resort to the usual set of cheap tactics? So, in tandem with the eased 8 hook requirement, players would have the option of filling out their 4th perk slot. Now the Adepts would only require a player to achieve a merciless victory whilst using the killer's 3 teachable perks. This would allow many killers to actually run a viable slowdown perk in the 4th slot, and dramatically increase their chance of victory without the need to resort to the usual tactics. That's it for this one. These are all the suggestions I have for improving the reward system's current weaknesses as I see them. Let me know what you think, leave a comment, or make a forum post and send a link. Whatever your ideas are, I want to hear them. I don't make this video to declare my ideas as gospel or something, I just hope to maybe inspire some conversations. By discussing our ideas and putting them together, we can get that bit closer to making DBD the best version of itself. Thank you very much for watching, dear viewer, and I hope to see you in the next one.